planning does two things for a salesperson. It increases your chances of success and it increases deal velocity.
Welcome back, everybody. I have Paul Watts with me, and I'm delighted to have you, Paul. Welcome.
Hey, John, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, mate. My pleasure. Hey, I want to get down to a subject that I think is really, really important. I know you do too, and that's call planning. The fact that selling is about meeting with people and having conversations with people, it's really important that we create value through that conversation. And if we don't plan it, we're not going to create the value. Is that true?
I would agree so, yeah. I think it's an unfortunate truth that most salespeople spend more time planning for their weekly shopping than they do planning for their success in a call with a client.
Is that a good analogy? I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tell me what you mean by call planning.
So for me, when I'm planning for a meeting with a client, the first thing that I'm asking myself is, what's my value-based objective for this meeting? And when I say value-based objective, I think of value as bidirectional. So what is the value that I'm bringing to this client? What value are they going to get out of this meeting? And also, what value am I going to get out of this meeting? Because if there's only value for one party, then I would suggest that the objective has not been set as well as it could have been. So I think it's important that we think about setting a value-based objective. I think it's important that you build an agenda that allows you to meet those value-based objectives that you've set for the meeting. And for me, those are the two fundamental parts of call planning. Of course, that goes in a calendar invite to the client, but the reality is that for me, the two major components of effective call planning are setting value-based objectives and putting forward a proposed, and I always use the word proposed, agenda for the meeting that will actually allow you to meet those value-based objectives.
So the value-based objective is an outcome you're looking for both the customer and yourself.
Yes.
Okay, so you're setting an outcome-based objective and you use the word value around that. I'm happy with that. That's good. Okay, and then we put an agenda together. And what else do we need? I mean, we talked in one of the earlier meetings about thinking through the sort of questions we need to ask.
Yeah, I think when you put your agenda together, you're going to ask yourself, what steps do I need to go through in what chronological order to achieve the value-based outcome that I've set for the meeting? So it almost becomes intuitive as to how you're going to build that agenda. What steps have to have gone through. So if part of it is discovery, then of course there's going to be a series of questions that you may need to understand the answers to be able to realize that value-based outcome.
So you just mentioned discovery there, and of course that's just one step in a sales process. So the call planning will be quite different as to where you are in that sales process. Is that
right.
True?
Yeah, absolutely. If this is a first meeting, it's going to be a very broad-based discovery questions. But if this is a fifth visit or sixth meeting with a client, the discovery questions are going to be much more focused on probably some specific aspects of that client's challenges that weren't covered in previous meetings or that weren't fully covered in previous meetings. Perhaps a key stakeholder wasn't present, and that person is now going to be there. Subject matter expert from the client who can answer the questions that previously weren't able to be answered, perhaps.
In an earlier discussion, we talked about mindset and the importance of mindset. So when you're putting a plan together, in my mind, mindset's really important. I had a friend of mine, Wayne Maloney, that says all the time, we have discovery in our sales process. And unfortunately, a lot of us think it's our discovery. We're discovering something. But he has a customer that very clearly said to him, hey, this is my discovery, not yours. Come in, help me with my discovery. And so think of that from a planning point of view. If I'm going to go into a meeting, the real focus is on helping the customer discover, and you ask the questions that help them discover, and ultimately you'll discover in return.
I would challenge that customer's thinking and perhaps suggest that it's bidirectional discovery, because when I'm meeting with a client, I'm interviewing the client to see if they're a good fit for me to partner with in the same way that they're interviewing me. So my discovery questions are trying to understand their needs and their challenges and objectives to determine, one, if I've got a solution that can solve that, or if I know someone who can, so that I can put that person in touch with that client. Similarly, the client's discovery with me is this somebody that I trust? Is this person credible? Is this somebody that we might want to partner with, even if it's not on this project, perhaps on a future one?
Well, that's part of what the customer is looking for, but the customer is looking for help in thinking through their problems and issues and challenges too. So when you're going in to do a discovery, you're helping them discover by bringing insightful questions to the table, by telling stories that will help them understand the scenario they're in and how they might address it and so on. So the discovery, and this comes down to mindset again, if the focus is first on all the information I need and not on how can I create value through the conversation with the customer, you're doing yourself a disservice, and the customer is going to say, "This, I've just been through a meeting where I got no value."
Right.
So you talk about bidirectional. I talk about mindset being primarily for the customer, and you will learn what you need to know anyway, but the focus is on the customer creating value for the customer. So the planning, the core planning in my mind, the primary driver has to be what you can do for the customer. And secondary is then out of that, am I going to learn what I need to learn?
I would agree with you that the primary mindset is serving that customer. So how do I help? That should always be your mindset. If you go into a meeting with the right intent, everything else will fall into place. I agree with you there. Absolutely.
Good. But at the same time, there's nothing worse than walking away from a meeting and saying, I didn't get that information I needed.
That's why I think
I do agree it's got to be bidirectional.
I think it's important that you consider everybody's needs, not just the clients, because of course your organization has needs too. But I think you're absolutely right. If you go in with the intention to help, you're going to serve that client and you're going to serve your own organization far better, because even if you can't sell them anything, that customer's going to remember that you helped them. And the next time they have a challenge, you're going to be the first person they think of to call and ask to come back in.
Perfect, Paul. Look, core planning is vitally important, and I agree. And unfortunately, I see too many people winging it, going to the next meeting, one meeting to the next meeting, to the next meeting, and they haven't thought about it, and they go in and they follow a path or process which doesn't suit on that particular meeting. Planning is so important.
Now, when it comes to planning, John, I always say that planning does two things for a salesperson. It increases your chances of success and it increases deal velocity. So let me explain what I mean by that. So when I say it increases your chances of success, let me ask you this question. In your opinion, John, how important is trust and credibility in a business relationship?
Essential.
Can you have a business relationship if there is no trust or no credibility?
No.
I would agree with you. I would say it is essential to a business relationship. Now, if you want to improve your chances of success with a client, then of course you need to build trust and you need to show or demonstrate your credibility to that client. There's no simpler way to do that than to actually plan a meeting and put together a value-based objective and a clear agenda for how you intend to achieve that value-based objective.
And then deliver to it.
And send that to the client as a calendar invite and then follow that. Because right away, the client can see that you're not there to waste their time. Your intentions are in the right place. You're trying to help. And that you are competent because you followed the process that you laid forward. What better way to demonstrate and build trust and demonstrate your credibility than just to send a simple calendar invite with a clear value-based objective and an agenda?
And it's so easy to do with a little bit of thought.
And how long does it take? 5 minutes? 10?
Well, it depends on how much research is required, but yeah, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, it's so important.
Oh.
But in most cases, you don't need to spend more than 10 minutes on it.
I agree. I think it was Stephen Covey wrote the book, The Speed of Trust.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest business moves at the speed of trust and credibility. I think it's those two combined that drives business relationships forward. And then we talked about increasing deal velocity. Well, think about it from the perspective of, have you ever been to a meeting, John, and you got there and the customer said, oh, gee, John, if I'd known we were talking about that, I would have invited Fred. And you go, oh, so now that means there's another meeting. There's a second meeting. And of course, if you'd set forth a clear objective for what the meeting was, so if you defined what the outcome, the value-based outcomes were for both the client and you'd laid forward a proposed agenda, the client would have said, you know what, John, to achieve that outcome, I'm going to need Fred. And Fred's not available on that day. Let's schedule it for this day. And what that means is you've just saved your time and the customer's time, and you're going to have a far more productive meeting because everybody comes to that meeting in the knowledge of what the outcome, the desired outcome is, so they come prepared. You're going to have far fewer meetings and far more productive meetings just by sending calendar invites with clear value-based objectives and proposed agendas.
And the velocity continues on, accelerating away. I agree. Okay, great discussion. Core planning is a pet subject of mine, and it's a discipline we all need to build. So I really appreciate this, and I look forward to another discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show, John.
My pleasure. Bye, Paul.
Bye.